welcome back to the Lorna Whiston Schools podcast, the place where we connect with parents from around the globe to share our experiences on a variety of topics. We are a leading school and have been based in Singapore for over 40 years. We specialise in developing a lifelong love for learning, and our focus is on working with our parents to develop their children's 21st century skills, transforming them into the talented, critical thinkers of tomorrow. I am your host, Paula Rawlins, the Business Development Manager for Lorna Whiston Schools. I am honoured and delighted to be talking to a very special lady today, Lorna Whiston herself, the founder of Lorna Whiston Schools. We will be talking to Lorna about where it all started and the history of Lorna Whiston Schools.
Hello, Paula. Lovely to be with you.
Good afternoon, Lorna. Good afternoon. Lovely for you to join us. And we have a lot of people ready and waiting and eager to listen into our podcast today. So I'll get going. And I would like to start off with a question that all of our parents and our listeners would like to hear about. We would like to ask you to go back a little in time and share with us what brought you to Asia in the first place and when and why you set up Lorna Whiston Schools.
Well, that is going back a long time because I was in Singapore for very many years. In fact, I first arrived in Singapore when I was 23 years old, when I accepted a position teaching in Malaysia. And I met my husband in Malaysia. And then in 1967, we moved to Singapore, where we've been ever since. So I was always a teacher. And then later, for 6 years, a head teacher in an international school. And it was the end of that time, in 1980, that I started Lorna Whiston Schools, really because it was very obvious then that English language was needed in Singapore. Children at that time, a lot of our students could hardly speak English. You know, we're going back a long time, 40 years. And although the integrated curriculum of English and another language was in place by then, many of the parents had been educated either in English or Chinese. So many of the parents couldn't speak English, and many of the children couldn't. We had to have translators when we spoke to parents. Not all of them, but many of them. So there was a need. And we started small, first of all with one teacher, that was me, and then we slowly expanded. And through my own experience over the years as a teacher and head teacher, I was very interested in interactive teaching, which is not really possible in a large classroom, especially in those days when the children didn't speak English. So from the very beginning, we were thinking in terms of teaching English through communication. Of course, you have to bring in the structures, the grammar structures, the language structures, but you can teach them in an interactive way. So we started in the beginning with lots of games, because learning a language is not about listening. Learning a language is about communication. If you can't talk back, you will never learn the language. So that is how we started in the first place. And it sort of took off from there, really.
And Lorna, how many children would you have in your first sort of class when you started off? Was it a large number of children or?
No, we started with very small groups. I mean, the whole idea really was that in classes there were 40 children. There's a limit to what you can do in a classroom with 40 children. Certainly there's not a lot of time or space or ability for children to actually take part in any kind of conversation. So we started in the beginning, I seem to remember, with about 6 or 7 children per group. And then slowly it grew until 12 children by the time I left, and presumably that's probably what it is now. 12 children, that is enough children and young people for interaction. So, and enough that you communication between the children and between the teacher. But at the same time, it's small enough that you can give individual attention to various children. So to me, that's an ideal number for the kind of thing we did.
Well, it's exactly the same now. We have between 10 and 12 per class. And as you say, it lends itself for good interaction between the teachers and the students. So thank you for that. One of the questions that we would like to know is that how do you think, from an educational perspective, Singapore has changed over the years?
Well, there's been a huge progress, of course, and an enormous change. Everybody is now bilingual. And I think the idea now is to improve the level of English language with the children, and at the preschool in both English and Chinese. But most of them come to us they are able to speak English and Chinese. So you're starting with a different level altogether. But they still need, I think, there's still a lot of refinement, a lot of refining that needs to be done. In particular, I think Singaporean children don't have a terribly wide vocabulary. And so increasing the vocabulary and so that they can communicate properly when they're an adult and in the senior years of school, that's very important. And so that's always been important, and it still is. Actually speaking to the level of a native speaker is quite difficult, and it takes a lot of interaction. The thing is with children talking between each other, they don't use a very sophisticated language. And in fact, even parents talking to children, it's quite basic. You don't really go into deep stuff. So learning that through classes, and learning that particularly through reading, is very important. And I think that's an extremely important aspect. You can't write it down if you don't know the correct words. So you have to be able to understand the correct phrases so that you can write down what you need to say. And that's important at every age and for adults as well.
You mentioned the children don't speak a very sophisticated language. I'm guessing you've heard of the language that they sometimes use called Singlish, but the parents do not like, and they send them to Lorna Whiston Schools to get rid of that Singlish. So any memories of any Singlish during your day?
Of course, particularly in the early days, there was a lot of Singlish. But we also found, children like to talk to their friends and their mates in a different way. Very often what would happen is that the students in class would be speaking good English. And as they went out the door, they would immediately lapse into Singlish as they spoke to each other. So they were speaking beautiful English. And then as they go out the door, then one would turn to the other and say, "You want to go to McDonald's or not?" And we think, "Oh my God, we're back to square one." But this is how it is, really. It doesn't mean that they're like that all the time. But I think that particularly, Singapore is an international city, an international state, and business is all international. So when you get to that stage and when the children have to realize that when they're an adult, they have to learn to speak good standard English. Accents don't matter. We all have accents, different accents. That's not a problem. But speaking good standard English, that's very important indeed, because otherwise foreigners can't understand what you're saying. So it's as simple as that. So having a good vocabulary and being able to express yourself well, both in speech and in writing, but these days more than ever with speech, because we're doing more and more talking all the time, especially these days with digital works and things. Speaking is really, really important. I think the difference in a way between when the expectations of parents, when the children came to us in the 1980s, the parents are more realistic these days. In the beginning, they rather thought that their child would learn to speak perfect English in 3 months. And of course, it can't happen that way. So, they come and say, "Well, she's been with us for 3 months. We can't see that there's been a lot of improvement." But we might, as teachers, see a lot of improvement in the child, just not up to the parental expectations of that time. I think nowadays people are more sophisticated. They speak more languages. They understand it's not that easy. The end result is what we're looking at. And of course, the schools also progress more steadily and in the progressive sort of way as well. So the actual whole language in schools has improved too, tremendously.
Absolutely, Lorna. What we would like to know next is, if you could go back in time a little, is there anything that you regret you didn't do or you didn't implement during your time?
Really, I don't think so. a couple of things. I mean, when you have a business and when you have an education business, you've always got new ideas coming. You always want to try the ideas out. For a while, we started giving lessons to adults. That didn't really work. You know, our genre really was teaching children and young people and young teenagers, and that worked well. Adults have to be really motivated to want to learn, and so we that didn't quite work well. We dropped that really. But the thing is, I think, I mean, that the interactive way in which we'd always worked was so important. We improved it in a way as we went along. I mean, several things happen in a class. The classroom lessons are usually based initially in the planning stage around a language structure. But it isn't just presented as a grammar. It's introduced usually with a game or some interactive manner, and then it slowly progresses until and there are several different kinds of activities, because children's, especially at the younger stage, children's concentration span is not very long. So presenting it in different ways, in realistic ways, and getting communication from them, telling stories, which might include that particular language development, getting a discussion about the story, getting their reaction, getting the children to have confidence in speech. I think perhaps that's one of the big differences between the modern Singaporean and the Singaporean child of the 1980s. Originally, the children sat and listened. They waited for words of wisdom to fall out of the teacher's mouth, you know, and they didn't say a word. And we had to be trying to get them to speak was difficult. And that's why games and interactive ways of working was successful, because they grew confident. This is the big thing about the speech and drama, of course. You know, the speech and drama gives them confidence. It's particularly good for shy children. Parents often wonder, I think, what good does speech and drama do? It's not in an exam. So what's the point of it? And the great point of it, I feel, is that it gives the child confidence. They forget about what they're supposed to be. They forget about speech. They're thinking about what they're trying to say, what they're trying to pretend to be. And it also involves not only speech, but all parts of the body. There's movement in it as well. And pronunciation comes into it too. It's very much a part of language development. And as well, the kiddies love it. That makes a difference too.
Yes, they do. And it certainly brings out the confidence in the kids, even the shyest ones. It might take a couple of weeks for them to start interacting and moving around, but eventually they start to speak out and enjoy it. Something I'm really, really pleased that you've mentioned is games. Now, when the kids go home and say, oh, we had lots of games in class today, some parents don't like to hear that, even though we explain to them that these games are specifically designed to fit in the curriculum and bring something to life. So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I really hope all the parents out there heard that, because you've been doing that from day dot. So thank you for that, Lorna. My next question is, and it's quite a tough one, actually not really a tough one, but I'm sure you've got a mountain of memories. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind about classes, about friends, about teachers, anything funny, anything you want to share going back?
Lots of things over many, many years. I can't think of any particular incident, but I think maybe starting up the speech and drama classes, which we did after a while, and of course starting up the preschools. That was a huge. Unfortunately and sadly, we started in 2003, and that was the SARS year. So our first year for the preschools, we had hardly any children, lots of teachers. Nobody wanted to send their children to school with SARS. So it's exactly the same as has happened this last year in 2020 with the pandemic. It's not good for education, and everybody's very afraid of catching the disease. But of course, the preschools did very well. And again, we've always had the same integrated approach, integrating Chinese and English together as far as possible, getting teachers integrating the curriculum together as they went along. It's always been very successful, and I've always loved going into the preschools. The children are always so keen and enthusiastic, So that was definitely a milestone. So yes, there have been lots of milestones along the way. Opening in KL was also a milestone as well. So yes, many, many milestones, really.
That's brilliant. To keep you up to date, and you already know, we are in COVID times, but Lorna Whiston Schools introduced and launched Lorna Whiston online classes throughout the COVID period when the schools were closed, and the preschools. And it became a very big hit with the parents, although we all struggled at the beginning because it's all new for us. Imagine doing Zoom classes, meeting your students over the internet was very alien to both the teachers, students, and parents. But it really, really helped us out. It kept us going. And now we're all back in the classroom, and the teachers are glad to have the face-to-face. But we do have a new audience globally now, because we've got teachers in many countries teaching online for Lorna Whiston Schools. So that is something we're moving forward with.
It is the way forward. It is definitely the way forward. And there's a lot of advantages. I mean, for instance, I'm sure you found this during the COVID times, as we have in England here too, is that as far as the language classes are concerned, of course, the children can do it from home. They don't have to get up and make that journey and come back again. So that's a good advantage. There are disadvantages. I don't think online really takes the place of face-to-face teaching. It is face-to-face, of course, but in a different kind of way. But if you want to get real communication, then you need to be with the students and with the children. But it has a place. And not only does it have a place, but I think that it's going to happen more and more as time goes on. And now that this year has happened, it's set the pace for the future. It will go forward and improve as time goes on. So, yes, it is the way forward, and it's a very exciting way forward as well.
Well, Singapore is doing very well at the moment in their handling of COVID-19, and see things still going back to normal, slowly, but with a lot of caution. But everybody is fine, and we're all doing good, and the kids are back in school. Now I'm going to talk about something that I know is very, very close to your heart, and something we all have to know about when we join Lorna Whiston Schools. And that is about reading and writing, especially books. And I'm sure that you've set up a lot of libraries at Lorna Whiston Schools over the years, and had a big say, I know, that in what books are put into the curriculum. But what I would like you to help us with today is to tell parents how important books are for children, and when they should start introducing books to their children.
Well, I think you start introducing books from a very young age. I mean, I would say from 18 months, but children are not reading at that age. But you can, as a parent, you can be telling stories to the children at that age, getting them interested in books. Books, there are very many marvelous books around now. When we first started, there weren't that many good books in Singapore in 1980, and we imported them all from UK. But that's not necessary anymore. So I think start by talking to your children, reading them stories, and then they can begin to start reading at about, if their English is good enough, that is, at about 5 years old, 5 to 6 years old. Don't start them reading at 2 to 3. Some parents think that, you can, but it is possible. In fact, if you bombard the child every day with but the child can learn to read, but they won't understand what they're reading. Reading is about comprehension. It's about understanding, and it's about enjoyment. And so you start, as we have always done in class, with the smaller children, and with carefully selected books and stories, and then slowly progress. The child must progress at their own rate, and that means they must enjoy the books. One of the problems we've always found, and I'm sure it's still the case, is that parents who are very keen for their children to do well push them too fast. They want them to go up to the next stage. And our books have always been carefully worked out in stages so that the child at each particular level reads maybe 40 books and then slowly goes up to the next level. The idea is that the child should be completely competent at that level, be able to read fluently at that level before they progress to the next level. If you push them too hard, if it's difficult for them, the book is too difficult. And you must give them an easier book. Parents don't like that idea because they think the child's going backwards. But it's not a case of forwards or backwards. It's a case of the child understanding, comprehending, enjoying the book at that level. And we do it vaguely and according to an age level, but the age level is only to do with the normal understanding and enjoyment and comprehension of that particular age. But many children read above their age level. Some children prefer younger books. The most important thing is that they should enjoy the books and not be pushed too hard. But books is how a child extends their vocabulary. That's one huge way of extending your vocabulary, especially as they go older and into the top primary and secondary years. We've always found if you can get the child interested in a book by 6 and 7 and enjoying the books, then they're hooked on reading. But starting when they hardly read a book, starting them at 10 or 11 is too late. They're not interested anymore. And the other thing is that very often parents and children themselves think, no point in reading because it's not in the exam. They're interested in whatever is in the exam. But, of course, reading sets you up for the exam. It sets you up for fluent understanding, for a wider vocabulary. It is extremely important. I really feel that that's something very often parents don't understand and children themselves don't understand. This is why there's a lot of reading all the way through and a lot of the books go home. And again, the child needs to enjoy the books. Sometimes parents feel, oh, if the book's too easy, the child won't enjoy it. But it's actually up to the child to make that decision, not the parent. Reading easy books is okay. You know, we all read easy books. We don't all sit down and read huge scientific tomes, do we? No, we now and again go into love stories. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think, yes, reading is very important indeed.
The children at Lorna Whiston School still read to the teacher in every lesson. They
yes.
to choose their own book and swap it over and take it home weekly. But you are correct in saying that some parents do want to push the child onto the next level. But once that's explained by the teacher and the reason why the child is not ready, they happily accept our advice and stick with it with great results further down the line. So thank you for that. What I would like to know now is what would you say to the parents, how beneficial English enrichment or speech and drama programs benefit their children as an after school or weekend activity or an online activity?
I think it extends what they do in class. I mean, of course, we do cover some of the things that they do and some of the structures that they do in class as well. Because, I mean, within the Singapore system, and in fact, within any education system, progress in school is very important indeed. That's what, that's how the child is judged, and that's what counts. But it expands what they do in school, it enriches what they do in school, and it's a less formal way of working, which is something you can do with a small group that you can't do with a large group of children. And again, it extends the vocabulary, and I think also improves the writing ability because the teacher has to, can look over what they're doing and give some instruction and guidance.
And the PSLE examination in Singapore is always a worry for the parents, and a lot of our students come to our English classes to enhance those skills in preparation for the PSLE. And we had one of the top performers at Lorna Whiston Schools for the PSLE last year, so we were delighted about that. But I know it causes the parents an awful lot of stress, the PSLE examinations and the English components of it.
I think the primary 6 PSLE examinations, our classes at that stage have to be more formal. They have to be an extension of what the child's doing at school. There has to be practice for skills because it is very important and it's a milestone in the child's education. So, I think towards primary 5 and primary 6, particularly primary 6, the classes are more formal. They're very much more an extension of what the child is going to need for the school exams. And that has to be so. And I think also that gives the opportunity for the child to explain, for the group to explain to the teacher too, exactly what structures and what parts of the curriculum they're finding difficult. So I think in one way, although it's just set out in the curriculum, there needs to be a little bit more elasticity, shall we say, according to the children and the group's needs as well. And I think the teachers they're able to do that.
Is there any tips on, I mean, this is difficult. How do you stop the child getting stressed? How do we stop the parents really getting so stressed about these exams coming up? They're in safe hands in school and with us, but there seems to be this anxiety as we go towards PSLE.
I think exams are stressful all the time for children, for adults. It is a stressful thing, taking an exam. But I think, in a way, if the parent gets too stressed about it, the child will get stressed. So in a way, you also need to know that to make sure they have enough sleep, that they also have some relaxation during their day. It's not all work, 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 work. There has to be some relaxation. And I think for the parents too to understand, and for the child to understand, it's important. It's not life or death, though, is it? I mean, there has to be that. So I think giving them other things to do, using their weekends to give them things which are less stressful to do sometimes, going out for a day, those things are important as well. Getting enough sleep, leading a healthy life, and having some time for play, all of those things are important.
I think so too. I think some time for play and getting out at least one day a week together as a family. The family
Yes.
the family Sunday thing, even if it's a walk in the park or out to have dinner or cycling around, it just gets them all together and out in the fresh air.
Yes.
Lorna, we would like to ask you, do you have any advice for our parents and our students who are listening in today? Any advice you'd like to pass on, tips you'd like to pass on to them?
I think that, of course, a parent's role is very different from a teacher's role. But I've been both for a long time. But I think communication is very important, both at the younger level and at the older level. Traditionally, and in the old days, when we first started, the culture was very much that parents advised their child and the child listened. Now, that's changed a lot over 40 years, of course. But I think listening to what child has to say, engaging them in discussions, letting them say what they want to say, not quite so much emphasis of what is right to say and what is wrong to say. We all have ideas and thoughts running through our minds. So getting the students or the children to express that, communication and having time. In Singapore, parents are all busy. Dads go out to work, mums go out to work, and the last thing you want when you come back after struggling through the traffic at the end of a long, hard day is a 4-year-old saying, "Why is the moon up in the sky?" All right. And you're getting dinner, and the temptation is to say, "No, come along, have dinner, never mind about that now." But just giving a simple reply helps. It can be very simple. It can be something like, "So that we can see at night." That keeps a child happy. Then, of course, they'll ask other questions as well. But communication, and with older students and with older children, getting them to talk and engaging them in conversation, not thinking of them as children so much as part of the family that gathers together and talks. Just as you talk to your sisters and brothers and cousins and so on, having conversations and including your children in those conversations, I think is important. It improves their language, it improves their confidence, and that's really important. So that, I think, is perhaps one of the most important messages.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. And our final question for today, and this podcast will be high on their list to listen in on later, and that is the teams at Lorna Whiston Schools and the preschools, the teachers, the administration staff, some who were employed by you who are still there, including myself, will all be listening in. Have you got any words for all of the new team, the teachers, the backroom staff, the admin staff, the whole team? Anything you would like to say to them? They've all worked extremely hard since last year, since COVID kicked in, and adapted really, really well, working from home and getting used to Zoom meetings and technical hitches here and there, but yet they still carry on the great reputation that Lorna Whiston Schools has.
I think one of the main things about teaching, of course, is that you should enjoy your work. It's one of the lovely things about it is that you are communicating. You're communicating with other people all the time. So it's a worthwhile job. And so I feel enjoying what you're doing. Obviously, it involves a lot of hard work. So like any job, really, but being part of a team and working as a team, I think is really important. And enjoying what you do. I mean, teaching in a way is always considered a little bit of a humble occupation, but I was a teacher for 60 years, more than that, and I always enjoyed it. And I'm still interested in it now. I mean, of course, I don't teach anymore, but, I'm still interested in children. So I would say carry on the good work, and that's it.
Well, Lorna, perhaps we could invite you to be a master teacher and do some master classes online for us. So I'm going to leave you with that thought, and the door is always open for you to do that. And I think it would be great. I mean, you mentioned it like that, but I think it would be a great idea. A master class conducted by the founder herself, Lorna Whiston Schools. So that is indeed food for thought. Lorna, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Right. I think let the new people move on. Education is progression. That means young people, okay? All of us old folk, we sort of look on the sides. Slowly we have to fade out. But it's been a great life, and I've enjoyed it.
Fade out anytime soon, because we will be back with you for sure. Lorna, thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And we hope you enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed hosting it. Do send us any questions you might have, or share with us an encouraging story about how you or your child have benefited from being a student at Lorna Whiston Schools.